our next two storytellers, Eric and Judge. Come on up.
Good evening.
Hello.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Paul, for inviting Eric and myself to participate along with my fellow storytellers, our fellow storytellers. You can clap. So our story starts about 34 years ago, believe it or not.
We were 12.
Well, you were 12, I was 7. I was working for the Gap in a brand new shopping center. What? I was working for the Gap in this brand new shopping center located in downtown San Diego. I loved working for the Gap because it gave me a chance to wear some of the hottest 80s fashions and make a little money at the same time too. I also used to dance for this little dance troupe called the Bugle Boys. Anyway, when the store opened, it was summertime, and in walked this tall, handsome, blonde customer. He needed help finding, jeans to fit his 38-inch inseam. I told him my name was Judge, and if there was anything he needed, just to let me know. So over the course of the next 4 years, I would see Eric frequently in the store, and even when I left the Gap, I would run into Eric and his partner at various events throughout San Diego. And I think one of the last times I saw Eric was when I was dancing at SeaWorld. Dancing at SeaWorld, and I think it was like 1989 or something like that.
Yeah. Yes, back then I was blonde. My partner at the time was a hairdresser, and I think that blonde had to be his favorite color because eventually everybody who went out of his shop ended up being blonde. Well, I do remember the first time I laid eyes at Judge at the Gap store. I thought he was very cute. He had what I'm supposed to tell you was a little porn stash, but to me it was more like a perv stash. It was one of those, like John Waters, half mustaches. And he had a Jerry curl. Yes. But he was very professional with me, very nice, and also, of course, very helpful. And I thought he was really cute. And so from that point on, for the next 4 years, I think the Gap is the only place I went shopping, just to be helped with my favorite sales clerk. Yeah. And then in 1990, after the death of my partner from AIDS, I started my life here in Portland.
And I think in 1991, I was living in Los Angeles. In 1989, I had this breakout sensation role as an escaped convict, a drug dealer, and just an all-around bad guy on television's America's Most Wanted. Do you remember me? How you doing?
Okay.
I think that was my favorite line, or my only line.
They're only going to remember that you didn't have your shirt on during that time.
Oh, that's right. It was also my first shirtless shot, shirtless role. Anyway, I really wanted something else, and so I moved to Los Angeles to take my performance skills to the next level. And from what I remember, it was like Gay Pride weekend, and I was walking along Santa Monica Boulevard towards the festivities when I ran into Eric and some guy. And it had been several years since I had seen him, and, I was a little nervous and excited, and he looked good. He looked real good. And honestly, I don't think I remembered how sexy he was up until that moment. So after some small talk, he was out of my life. He was gone.
So I was down there in LA to break up with that guy. We had started dating here in Portland, and when he told me that he's moving to LA, and I just didn't want a long distance relationship. And I remember seeing Judge on the street. I remember exactly what he was wearing: tank top, suspenders, and these shorts.
Well, I think it was a turquoise teabag tank top and some yellow shorts with matching suspenders and scrunchy baggy socks that were also yellow. But anyway.
Well, I really remember just his legs. Beautiful legs. So, but we never got to like really chat. It was a short conversation. We went on our separate ways, but I kept on thinking about him, and I was upset that I never got his contact information, but you know, how am I gonna do that when I'm with supposedly a date? And so I came back to Portland thinking about Judge and just wondering, like, damn it, I didn't get any of his contact information. You know, I kept on thinking about that, and I had a hard time remembering his name. I said, but I really wanted to like run into him again, but how or when or like if that was ever gonna happen, I didn't know. It would be 8 years later that we finally did run into each other.
So, and I think it was in 1993, I went to Europe for the first time. I was single and ready to mingle, and so I called this trip the Judge Does Europe Tour. But truthfully, I was, too afraid to explore my wild side, and so I just settled for, visiting some friends that I'd met while performing, in the States, and being a tourist, at least until I got to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, I met this guy. We kind of took a liking to each other, and I think within a year, I was living abroad. And honestly, I loved living in Amsterdam. It's one of my favorite cities in the world to visit. But, all good things come to an end. And so in 1999, that relationship was on the rocks. And I decided to fly to Seattle to surprise my mother for Thanksgiving in that year. And so when I got there, it was great spending time with family. But on the weekends, that Saturday specifically, I hung out with some guy friends. And we went to this bar in Seattle called The Cuff. Anyway, we decided to meet at Coat Check because they had plans on that Sunday morning.
So I was up in Seattle that same weekend just to hang out with some friends.
He had a date.
It was a blind date, and anyway, the friends I was staying with, I told them that I would be meeting him at The Cuff at midnight. So after my dinner date, I went to The Cuff. Well, I should start and let you know that earlier this same year, I had decided to make it my mission to find my next partner. And I'm telling you, I did everything I could think of to give me the upper hand and being able to recognize this person. It'd been, I was dating a lot, but I just wasn't feeling anything, and I really wanted to feel love again. So I did things like I studied astrology to see which, astrological sign would work best with my sign. So when I met somebody, just okay, are you a Leo? Are you this? If it wasn't, I was going to date him. So
Date.
And I also knew that clarity was a big thing. So every night I wrote on this list the characteristics of my next partner, the things that I thought that they should have. And lastly, I went to a psychic just to find out, is this even going to happen? Am I ever going to even meet, a next partner? I thought I only had one chance in love. So she told me, yes, that it was going to happen. It was going to happen the fall of that year. And she told me that I had already met my next partner. And I said, well, I've met a lot of guys. How am I going to know this one? And she told me that I would recognize him by his eyes. So, back at the Cuff, I arrived at midnight and went straight to the coat check. And I bumped into this guy who seemed really familiar, especially his eyes.
So, from my standpoint, as I turned around with my coat, because I was really getting ready to head out the door, I run into this guy who looked really familiar. And I said, "Hey, I know you." And so this familiar stranger just kind of stares at me. Because, you know, it's like this crazy guy is like, "Oh, yeah, you I know you." Mm-hmm. But seriously, I said, "I know you." And so I asked him what his name was. And he said, Eric Schnell. Okay. Well, yeah, all I know is like he was handsome and his face really did look familiar to me. And so I proceeded to ask him a couple more questions. Eric, where do you live? He said, Portland. I knew absolutely no one from Portland. And so I asked him one more pressing question. Eric, where did you live before Portland? And he said,
San Diego.
And I said, Eric, it's me, Judge, from The Gap. Remember me? And then we hugged.
Yeah, so Judge looked totally different. The purse stitch was gone, the jerry curl was gone, and he had beefed up a lot. And But hugging Judge just felt so good. That's the first time we ever touched. I mean, and holding him, it felt like home. It just felt like home. So we talked for a little bit and then grabbed each other's hand and went to find our friends. In the meantime, we decided that we would be going back together to Judge's friend's house, who he was staying with. And we spent 12 glorious hours together. And by morning, I knew Judge was the one that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. But he's living in Amsterdam. I didn't want a long-distance relationship. I mean, Los Angeles was too far. So it's like, what the hell are we going to do? So I ended up driving back to Portland alone, and I think I cried at least all the way to Olympia, maybe further.
Yeah, and in a few hours, I was actually on a plane heading back to Amsterdam. And leaving Eric was intoxicating. I felt like I was drunk without having anything to drink. I got a lump in my throat just seeing him drive away. But we exchanged contact information this time. So by the time my flight landed in Amsterdam, there was an email in my inbox from Eric. And so over the course of the next 4 months, we would call and email one another just to kind of get to know each other a little better. And I think he was having a birthday also in March. And so he wanted me to come out for his birthday. I have to also let you know that at the same time of his party, I was invited to go skiing in the French Alps with some friends. So I had some serious decisions to make, and really after talking to Eric and hearing the sadness in his voice, I decided to come to Portland instead.
So yeah, those emails and those phone calls really just set it in stone that I wanted to be with Judge. And it sounded to me like he was feeling the same thing. But after 4 months of not seeing each other, I really needed to know for sure that this was going to happen. So that is why I wanted him to come for my birthday. I just needed to know. Well, he arrived, and he didn't disappoint. And we discussed, him moving back to the States. So I get this, we talked on the phone, and he tells me that he was going to first move to Seattle because he told me that his mother said that she really needed him.
I wanted to get used to being back in the States, too.
And I just couldn't wait any longer. I didn't want him up in Seattle. I wanted him here in Portland. So I told him, I says, well, Portland is only 3 hours from Seattle and your mother, so why not just move here instead of moving twice? And thankfully, he agreed. So I was like, happy. Now enter Judge's mother. So she must have found out that Judge was planning on moving to Portland and not to Seattle. And I get this call from her telling me that she didn't think that Judge and I should be moving in together, we'd hardly know each other, and that she just didn't want Judge's heart broken again. In reality, she really wanted Judge with her and not with me. But she told me that she wanted to meet me she wanted to meet me and to discuss this face to face. And oh my God, I was so nervous about this. I didn't want to meet his mother. I didn't, especially not without him there. I could tell what she was going to do and what she was going to say, and it's just like, oh. But thankfully, that meeting didn't happen.
And I really wanted to see Eric. I really wanted to be with Eric. And so when I was in Amsterdam, I packed my things and bought a one-way ticket to Portland. Honestly, I was afraid to be back in the States again and being in Portland. When I moved here, there were several anti-gay initiatives on the ballot that year. I honestly could not understand why it mattered, whether or not someone was gay or not, gay, lesbian, LGBTQI, why it mattered. I couldn't understand why people could be so cruel. And I think that had a lot to do with me living in this, previously in this liberal mecca of Amsterdam, and then coming to Portland. I think the fact that I was dealing with so much culture shock, all of this newness, I sat down in the bed and I cried.
Well, I sat next to Judge and held him. And I said, "You're not alone. We're in this life together now."
19 years together now.